It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. Welcome to the podcast. We're here with Peter Lawrence. Say hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Our regular. And we got some special guests joining us. Bennett's back for another grueling podcast. And now we got Steve Bunda here, who is a licensed, certified dungeon/game master. There's no certification. I made that up. But since today we're going to talk about real-life lessons we can gain from D&D, we asked Steve to be here since he organizes all of our D&D stuff, which there is a surprising amount of, but not for IT people. So welcome, Steve. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. So, if you don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, should we explain it? Can you
Sure.
do you have an elevator speech for D&D, Steve?
That is. Let me see if I can do that. It is currently the most popular tabletop role-playing game on the market, focused on high fantasy, sword and sorcery role-playing. A cooperative game, we hope, and anyway, where people role play a character of their choice and complete missions and quests, solve puzzles.
It sounds like you're reading it off the
etc.
box, and yet I know you're just making it up. So
Yeah, I am.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for ages 14 and up.
It's
Trademark,
probably,
copyright.
it's actually probably good for ages probably like 8 to 10 and up. But I did run a session. Interestingly, you bring up the kid thing. For one of our colleagues, he has a son who I think is like 12 or 13, and I ran a weekend session for him and a bunch of his buddies. So a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds. Was good. Was successful. So
Nice.
I think that's about the age I started playing back in, I was probably younger, like back in the old days. Well, it started with Dungeon, and it was more of a board game. And then that turned into Dungeons and Dragons. So they added and Dragons. And that's when it kind of became, I think, the first of its kind. That pen and paper,
right.
dice, all that kind of stuff. And now all that's automated, right? There's an app where you can do all your
Yes. A lot of
stuff.
virtual tools that are very helpful to eliminate some of the painful math that goes with it. Although with the more recent edition, most of the painful math and referring to charts is completely gone. So that was a welcome relief for me, getting back into the game 4 or 5 years ago when I took a hiatus. Like you, Kyle, I started in probably 1979 or 1980 and played until late 90s probably, and then took about a 20-year hiatus and then got back into the game. And here we are today, where I play it every 2 weeks with a group online virtually. I have players on the East Coast, players here in the Midwest, and then a player on the West Coast. So we're able to get together. It's kind of fun. And then the stuff that I run out of the office in person.
So you got that dialed in.
So you've got remote and in person both covered.
Wow.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And during the pandemic, we ran a few adventures for the office folks virtually as well. Yep.
Awesome.
So as a DM or GM, is there a parallel between that and what you do for SDG?
That's a great question. I would say as a D&D enthusiast, let's use that rather than the DM-GM thing. I'm a D&D enthusiast.
There you go.
It's very interesting when you get a group of people together it's no different than any other team or community that you might be involved with in your own personal life or at work. There's the same sorts of feeling each other out. Are you like, hey, how are we going to work together? I think there's a lot of interesting barriers to entry about the game that come into play, much like when you try to join any other community. Like, I'm the new person, I know nothing. All of these people, I think, and I think this is the problem, is people think everyone else is an expert. And that isn't remotely the case. So, but I think that becomes a barrier in entry. How about you? What are your experiences with that?
You know, it's surprise. It to me, it reflects like, you know, because you have a character and you build that character and it's got skills and abilities and and it goes out and gains experience and goes on adventures and so it's like a career. It like reflects kind of your career path, career growth, the growth of your character, growth as a team, and then like different. It's really it's a lot like consulting, where you have different adventures you go on. Everyone's different. You run into different obstacles you have to overcome, things like that. Yeah, it's like the whole process. Um, you know, getting started. Every game I ever was a part of, every campaign, um, started with, okay, you're in a town. There's a tavern. What do you do?
Sure,
Well, we
sure.
should probably go buy some stuff and gear up, figure out what we're gonna need, figure out where we're gonna go. Like, so you got all that pre-planning, things like that. So, Peter, Bennett, did you guys ever play Dungeons and Dragons?
My hiatus is probably going on a little bit longer than Steve's was, so I've been taking a break. When you mentioned like joining a team and versus joining sort of a campaign or a group of players, as a consultant, I've joined so many teams, I have no fear whatsoever, right? I know it's going to go how it goes, and sometimes it's going to go awesome, sometimes it's going to go just good. Um, and when I think about joining sort of the campaign at work, I'm like, well, those guys have been playing together for a long time. I don't, I don't want to just step in there and get in the middle and stuff like that. And I never thought of it as joining a workforce or joining a team at a company. Sort of takes the pressure off of it a bit. But you're right. Like those guys are all experts. They've been playing together for at least 2 weeks in a row or something like that, right? And it just it it sets up a mental barrier probably more than an actual barrier. I know, especially with the game at STG, we try to like, hey, come one, come all. Let's get you going. We'll figure it out when you get here. We'll see how many people we have and do some fun things, right?
Right. Yep.
Bennett, how about you?
I have never played D&D, and so, but one of the things I think Kyle mentioned, you're dropped into a town and go to the tavern and gear up or whatnot. It kind of sounds similar to you're in between gigs and you're on the bench and somebody says, "Hey, we have this thing for you. You need to get ready. Go do research, learn, certify, whatever on these things." And sometimes that's very helpful for your campaign or your gig, and sometimes it's not. And you've geared up and prepared for something that you're not going to be encountering, and it's something completely else. Um, that happens, and then that expert thing. Sometimes if you're jumping into that and you get out there and you've geared up for this thing, or you actually know what you need to do, and there's these other people there that maybe you're coming in as a specialized role, maybe you're coming in as a generalist, but if you're coming in as that specialized role, you have this skill set and you have to figure out how to use that skill set to join the team versus say, hey, I'm kind of like this, I'm better than you and I'm here to save the, like, it's not about that. So you do play this kind of, how do I join the gang, or how do I, make myself presentable to this group of people that we're about to go on this campaign with.
Yeah, I think, and that's, the idea of like team goals versus individual goals, like putting your own goals or needs or whatever aside for the sake of the team and the team's success. So instead of like coming in, making it all about you and getting the most stuff and the best stuff, and it's like, that's great for your character, but like you're kind of pulling away resources and things from the rest of the team, or opportunities for success, things like that. So I think, like when you enter the team, coming in humble, coming in slow, figuring out the lay of the land, and then like, how can I be complementary to this current group of people? And that's with the game, you your group is called, or your team is called a party, your party. And your party should have complementary skill sets to be the most successful, a diverse set of skills. So as a game lead, a GL, or a dungeon lead,
An enthusiast.
Yes. Well, you're running things though.
DE, Dungeon Enthusiast.
Yeah. As a DE, how much do you guide versus just like guide the team, help them develop, help them work things out, versus just like running here's your obstacles, here's, now you're here, now you're doing this, now you're doing that, this happens, this monster attacks. So you got like running the game itself, but then you've got the people side of things. Like, how much of that do you do?
So that's really interesting, and it comes into play a lot often. The mantra of D&D or any role-playing game is describe, decide, and then determine. And so the describe is my role as the enthusiast. Like, hey, here's the situation before you that you are presented with, and then the players decide what they're going to do, and then we figure out what happens based on the real-time mental calculations of what is the probability of success, and then roll in the dice, which of course everybody loves. But what's interesting about that is, in any team, sometimes you can present the information, but then you need to get out of the way and let them solve the problem. Which is very similar to, like if you're on a software development team and somebody comes in and says, hey, I need this, and you should put it in this database over here. And the whole team goes, whoa, 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 don't let us solve the problem. So I do not play that role of trying to solve the problems. I just present the problems, let the team solve them in what is usually a completely random manner that I was not predicting at all. And that's probably where the juice of D&D comes from, is the completely unexpected solution. And my role as the enthusiast is not to solve the problem, but to make their solutions work in a plausible manner.
Right. And it's kind of a little bit different than the real world, right? Where you have more information a lot of times in a game than you do in a business. Now, not always, but sometimes about some of the backwater deals that have been hammered out, and I can't mention it to my team, but this is how we've got to do this, and that's the situation. You have to solve it, right?
Right. The politics of the organization versus the politics in the town or region in which the setting of the game sits. Yes, and you're right. As the enthusiast, I know the motivations of the bad guys.
Right.
So
Clearly.
yeah, I do know a little bit more. Yeah, right.
But still, there are some, in obviously experience is playing into this a lot, but there are times where you're going into a business and you can sense the sort of the, I don't know, the chaotic nature of the person, or the whatever motivates that person to behave the way they are. Not always, obviously. Sometimes people are having a really bad day and it's nothing to do to work, right? It's based on traffic patterns that morning or something, right? So, but you certainly, with experience, get a sense for why somebody's being the way they are and acting the way they are.
Sure. Yep.
Or even
go ahead.
In that
Bennett,
situation
take
too,
it.
even if they're acting in a manner where they're providing us or saying you have to do this solution, and it doesn't click and it makes no sense to you through the consulting process, I guess, going through this several times, sometimes you just have to learn to respect that this is the way it's got to be, and there's a blinder that you have on because you don't have all the information, and it looks like maybe I don't want to use the word stupid, but like this is not a good solution. This is not a good, but you got these blinders on, you can't see this, and it's a perfect solution and it works in the situation and you just can't see it because you're focused here, you're laser focused on your little thing and you can't see all of that. So that's happened to me personally several times where the blinders were pulled off and it's like, I get it now, I understand. And it's like, wow, I'm sorry if I gave you a hard time about the vision I could see and compared to what you could see. I had to go back and apologize sometimes for like, you were right, I was wrong.
The work enthusiast was presenting you with the information that you needed, and you weren't aware of it.
And yeah,
they were guiding you.
They were trying to gently nudge me, but I stuck to my principles, and sometimes you have to bend a little bit in order to get around the corner to see the next thing. And
they're not always right either.
True.
Yeah.
But sometimes
I found you have to just get things in motion and trust that you'll figure things out on the way and you'll learn more. And because that's always a challenge. You get in that solutioning mode, the architect mode, things like that, without enough information. But then you get into you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you have to it's kind of humbling to start a meeting with, okay, remember last week when I recommended this and then Bill said, no, we should do this other thing. Bill was right. I was wrong. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I've had a few of those moments and it's like, yeah, I didn't have all the information. So it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It just means that you didn't have a complete picture, and you just had to adjust as you fell flat in your face. You dust yourself off, make your apologies.
Right. Given the information you had at the moment, that was your best recommendation. But the information changed. That is no different than D&D. It is like planning is everything, but the plan is nothing. Trying to figure out what we're going to do, because the plan always gets abandoned, right? You always change it on the fly because there's too many things, variables that can change things up and make things a little bit more dynamic. No different than a team, which is what you're talking about, Kyle.
Yeah. The other thing is like the power of a personality in that team and the impact it can have. like the one player that decides to turn evil, and because they're just role playing their character, and that's what their character would do, and now everybody else is having a bad time because they've been backstabbed, and
Yes.
so it's like, well, if that hadn't happened, like this would have gone differently. And then, with experience, you kind of recognize that and go, okay, how do we work with this person? Because they're not going anywhere. Like this is one of our buddies, but so we're not going to like kick them off out of the game, and there's value of having them there. It's just kind of annoying. So you like just learning to work with people that you're not necessarily having good chemistry with, because personalities clash, people rub each other the wrong way. And as a consultant, you're going to run into personalities, and having to navigate that. I think that's good experience to learn in the game world that you can take into the working world, instead of learning that all in the working world. It's like, so yeah, before this project, we're going to do some gaming. We're going to have a 3-week campaign, so that we can learn how to work together before we start messing around with production.
Right.
No,
That sprint zero, setting ground rules, all of that stuff applies to teams as well as in playing the game. Yeah. You were going to say, Peter?
Well, I was going to say, like, yeah, getting the working agreements, but I was going to say that, having a 3-week D&D session before a project wouldn't be outside of some of these other off-site things that folks have come up with to try to improve teamwork and team cohesion and things like that. Getting to know people, a game brings out a lot too. I'm sure the players that you've been playing with for a long time much better than if you had been, just having a 1-hour phone call with them every time that you were gaming instead. Right. A lot of things come up. They act away. They do a different thing. They maybe get bummed by something that you weren't expecting them to be bummed about, and things like that. Right. It's
Right.
just opens them up a little bit more. And same with work. Right. There are sometimes where people react unexpectedly to the given environment, and yeah, you just kind of have to go with it. Right.
Very true.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
A lot of improvisation has to go on to solve a myriad of problems, and the game is no different than teams or life. Problems are going to come up, and there's not the hammer doesn't solve every problem. So in either life or the game. So
My dishwasher agrees with you.
But it's kind of fun to see how creative solutions can come up. Anyways, I interrupted both Bennett and Kyle, so I'm on fire today.
That's really how we roll. We're just in a constant state of interrupting one another. It's easier to avoid that in person. I think it's a symptom of virtual meetings. And so, Bennett, did you have?
Yeah, I got a question for Steve, actually. So you mentioned you have this group of people that you play with quite regularly, and then you had that kind of one-off group with, early teenage boys. Well, so that preparing, taking maybe a 3-week game session with people you're about to jump on a consulting gig with and continue on building something. What was the difference between, or the some of the larger differences, maybe if there are any, between the group you regularly play with and the weekend younger boy game? What were the
Yeah, okay. No, that's
Junior
an awesome
devs.
question, and I don't know that I've thought about this, so this is completely off the cuff. So we've got 3 things. We've got the regular group I play with, which we play roughly every other week, and have played for about 3-4 years together. And And then we have the stuff I do at work, which is like every couple of months, and it could be a new set of people every time, right? And then there's the group I ran for the teenagers, right? Teenagers, first thing I notice is that a lot of the ground rules that I cover up front, which is like something Kyle alluded to with the character turning evil. One of the ground rules is we never have fun at the expense of another player. That's no good at my table, and I will shut that down. So, and one of the examples I gave is the rogue who decides to pickpocket a fellow party member or take something secretly, even though everybody knows it's going on. You have to role play that the rogue took it secretly. I said that is not going to be at my table. So we're not going to do that. And yea, verily, that came to pass. Like, sure enough, the teenage rogue said, "Hey, I'm going to do this." And I went, "Wait a minute, let's pause for a second here. And let's go back to one of my ground rules." And then with teens, I feel you sometimes have to repeat things, especially clues. Because sometimes there's like a mystery or a puzzle to solve. And sometimes teens need a little bit more guidance. And I know that this is a fault on my part. Sometimes I think I've created some puzzle or mystery, and there's a fine line between making it too easy and making it way too hard. And that is a razor's edge that I'm constantly battling. But with teens, you've got to be a little bit more obvious. With the group that I play with regularly, everybody kind of knows everyone's personality and dynamic. And after 3-4 years, we can be a little bit more forgiving when someone does something. For example, my player recently has been cursed, and I seem to get cursed in the game like every week. And so I'm sort of doing things off to the side to reflect the curse. And it's kind of annoying to my other players sometimes, but I try to work the curse in, but then still come back and help the party.
Is that why I had to replace the bulb in the projector that went out during your game?
It could have been. No, that was not it. But even and then I'm going to come back to some similarities between all three. And then the ones in the office, it's a different group every time, different personalities, very different levels of experience in the game. And one of the biggest challenges that players such as myself who have been playing for a very long time, one of the challenges I have is not trying to guide the player too much and let them figure some things out, give them some options, but let them figure it out. And quite frankly, let something fail. Let something that they want to do go absolutely wrong, because sometimes those create A, the best learning experiences, and B, sometimes they create the most fun at the table is when things go terribly wrong.
Right. And at work too. I mean, it's good to let those junior developers, feed out a whole bunch of rope, knowing that, I know where you are. I can find you again. We'll get you back, but you've got to make this mistake because you're so intent on it. Nothing I say will change your mind.
Right. When the production deployment goes wrong, that's when people learn the most.
On Friday.
Well, the projects I'm most proud of are the ones that were the biggest struggle. And you come out the other end and you succeed in the end, but it was not a good time for a lot of it. It was like, this is hard. But you push through and you figure it out. And and you come on the other side and it's like, and the easy stuff, like you hardly remember. That was a cakewalk. I just went in there and did some stuff and that was it. No big deal. But the grind is, And then like having huge problems happen, disasters, like when you overcome those, and you have that moment of success, and you stand up and you cheer in the cube, and then everybody looks at you wondering what you did. Like
As a
those
senior, you
moments are
learn to do that.
awesome. Yeah.
You stand and you
Right.
cheer, but silently. So, Steve, back to the three different groups. I want to hear about the similarities too, to that they show.
Sure. And what's interesting is, so I ran an adventure at the office once, and which is interesting because I tend to run things that I'm beta testing for my next campaign, which is very fun. So I'll run an adventure, and then I'm like, that part didn't go well. I'm going to tweak that. And then like I'll run it like the next week for a different group, and okay, that worked better, but I still got something to work on. So that's kind of fun. But I've run a similar adventure, roughly the same adventure for a couple of different groups. And it's very interesting to see them roughly come up with the same solutions, or they get presented with they can get presented with the same problem, but they solve it differently. But they still feel like the same sense of euphoria when they've defeated the trap, when they've found something, when they figure out what is really going on with like the mystery behind it all. There is the same sense of wonder and accomplishment and teamwork, which is very fun.
Nice. Not quite
Yeah.
a twist ending, but a little bit close to that, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh, this was building toward this. I finally get it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much. I think there's so much value to have that experience together, to go on a campaign, and like I think the misconception that it's just a game, why are you wasting your time? It's like, no, this is training. This is training for life. This is training to socialize and get along with people and cooperate and solve problems together and complement one another, with different skill sets, and support one another, and leadership and all that stuff. There's so much there to be gained from it. Um, I almost feel like it should be required for like, okay, you need to get your hours in. Have you been gaming? Have you gone on some campaigns? Well, you need to get your hours in, to get your credit. It should be like a semester in school.
Yeah. It is a microcosm of like a Scrum team.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and it really, I was thinking this the other minute, was like, oh, maybe, as a Scrum Master, you should be put in charge of a game and see how it really plays out with something you don't know anything about and something the team doesn't know anything about. Like, you're all going to learn in that case, right?
Right.
And probably have some fun.
I just had this epiphany, by the way, during this discussion, based on your question, Peter. I have always taken a great amount of delight in my career and I'll call back to a previous job that I had where I kind of managed a group of folks, and I would bring in an intern every year, every summer. And that intern would work closely with me. And then at the end of the summer, if it went well, we would offer that intern a full-time job. And in 3 years in a row, it was like great interns, loved working with them. And I took a great amount of delight in teaching this person how to be part of a team, how to understand all the roles. I got a lot of value from it, a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And similarly, with the group that I've started at the office, I take a great amount of delight in bringing in new players and teaching them the game. And when they have these aha moments, and we had one last weekend. Do we mention other people by name?
Yes. Mention
Okay.
them.
Sure.
We can always fix
So
it.
It's your first
Eden.
name.
Eden had an awesome moment where she had this solution and she started to go with it, and another seasoned player like started to caution her about the ramifications. And another player who's an awesome coach and plays with me regularly, he's like, wait a minute, just let this happen, let this play out. And Eden, like, clearly, while she's a very new player, she clearly like read through this, figured it all out, and said, and here's how I'm gonna solve this. And it like blew my mind, and I had one of those moments where I was like, my work here is done. It was so great. It was absolutely awesome. So similar like career, bringing in new people and then teaching new people the game. So that was my epiphany. Thank you, Peter.
Sure. I think that works well. And I mean, I know it's kind of a crazy topic for us to talk about gaming and work and gaming, but it really is like there are so many, parallels that can be brought up, and new employees are and even interns are probably a great tie-in to that, because some interns come in and they do not fit. And
Yeah, I had one.
sometimes at the end, you can, if you get them to fit, it's more satisfying than having the person that just comes in and gets it right away, right? And so, same in the workplace. Like, okay, this person's going to take some hand holding, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna try our best, and then you get to the end, and it worked out. So
I think the other thing is the value of camaraderie within a team.
that's huge.
Yeah, and being able to develop that, kind of guide that. I think, like with your ground rules, Steve, like you're not really guiding that. You're just avoiding things that will stop that from happening, like
I think
stopping each other's enjoyment.
yes, I think I'm trying to have a neutral conversation now rather than a difficult one later.
So Bennett, as a person sitting and listening to us talk about the joys of gaming and working both simultaneously, does that get you any closer to maybe trying out a little D&D session, or other type of role-playing game or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I like trying new things, so I'm probably inclined to try it. Um, in my own personal gaming experience, so I've played video games online before, and I have some people that are geo diverse. So we have some people up north, some people down like south side of the country and east coast, and then one person way west coast that we jump online on our computers and we play real-time strategy games together. And the communication style is interesting because you need to communicate really quickly because things are happening in real time, and if you don't respond appropriately, and you're the weak link, you just lost the team, the game. And then probably, I don't know, 2 years ago, I started bringing my son into the mix on this, and communication styles with him, he hears things and speaks things very differently than our well-established group. And so it's just, to start with, it was very frustrating. Like, come on, dude, we need you to understand, like, go north. Where's north? It's the N, kind of a thing. So it was, he had to adapt, and we as the group had to adapt to allow him in. It was one of those frustrating, like, we're going to have to handhold you quite a bit. And he's going off doing things on his own. But now we're at a point where we can adequately communicate and accomplish the goals or tasks at hand that we're playing. And I think for us, that game, it's not so much about the game, it's much more about the interaction with the people and getting community and just like, hey, how's it going, hey, we're in a lull, how was this thing in your life, how was, so yeah, it sounds very familiar. A lot of the things that you guys are saying about this game ring a bell, similar to experiences I've had in other games. But maybe not quite as much in person or different game style, but yeah.
It's funny when you mention your son coming in that harkens back to the episode we did a couple bits ago, where we had the different age groups represented on the podcast, and the different communication styles, even amongst the adults, and the different age ranges made a big difference, and keeping that in mind really helps out.
Yeah, I think back to the ground rules and making sure no one is causing anyone to have a bad time. I've experienced that in guitar jam sessions. I've led many different jam sessions, and the rule is we all have to be able to play the songs. We all have to be able to play. And so if you get really experienced, really good players that decide they want to kind of go off on their own and play some really difficult music, it just leaves the other people behind. And then you're just in this awkward, like, you just feel like you're horrible, and I'll never be that good, and you're left out. It's such a negative feeling. So do you coach the more experienced people, that have played together for a long time? Do you coach them on how to avoid leaving people behind or excluding people?
Are you asking that of me?
I'm looking at you, figuring that I'm talking to you directly.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I don't think I do that, other than in the ground rules. I make sure I state, let each person play their character. You play yours, let them play theirs, and let the chips fall where they may. Because I think having really expert players, or really good players, or knowledgeable players can be a huge barrier to entry for someone who has never tried it and kind of wants to, but doesn't want to feel like a complete noob. Yep.
Yeah.
So
no, you should roll this dice for that. You shouldn't be attacking that way with that character. That's silly.
Well, I'd use this spell. If I were you, I'd be doing this.
Right.
That which is probably why I try to have specific events that are this event is new players only, and I try to make that kind of a focus, and which is really why I kind of started the group anyway. Was I wanted to introduce people who have never played, never had the opportunity to, are curious about it, create some safe space for people to come in and try it out. So,
the same thing goes for work too, right? You have some experienced employees or people on the team that are able to talk and work with all levels, right? And some experienced people either forgot that they didn't know it all at one point, or just have tired with, I'm not going to work with young people or inexperienced people anymore. I don't want to teach. I just want to leave me alone, and let me be who I am. And that does not make for a great team, right? It
right.
doesn't build.
I do want to come back to something Bennett mentioned. You talked about your son involved in the game. So I kind of quit D&D like in the 90s when I had children, and then as they started to get a little older, they'd find all my D&D books and my miniatures, and they were curious about it. And so I'd kind of run them through something a little bit, but never really paid much attention to it. Then they got older, adults. And a few years ago, my adult son said, "Hey, you should really play the new edition." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to play." He's like, "Come on." Well, after much cajoling, he finally got me to play it again. And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome again." So he got me to play. And my daughter, unbeknownst to me, my daughter was also playing, and she's off in another city. And what's really fun now is when I have ideas, when I'm stuck on adventures I'm building and creating, I do a lot of what are called homebrew. Is I call her and bounce ideas off her and go, "Hey, what do you think?" So my kids are involved all the time. It's kind of fun.
That's awesome. And you probably never thought that you would have a family D&D night ever, right?
No, I did not. And my daughter, this was a couple of years ago, I said, "What do you want for your birthday?" She goes, "I want you to run a D&D game for me and my friends."
Wow. Greater
cool.
praise.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So kind of fun.
I was
So,
gonna say,
go ahead, Bennett.
along the lines of having your kiddos play with you on some of these things that so I grew up playing this a long time ago, this game that I have played with my brothers and other people, but having my kids, so maybe one of the different things is you can play against each other on different teams, and so we've put my a couple people and my son on an opposing team to my brother and I, who are good at the game, and they have come up with some very interesting strategies that we throughout the entire time of playing have never even conceived of. And it's like, where did this come from? This is awesome. Like, you're using your brain. It's awesome to see this. So it's kind of this, awesome feeling like, oh, my kid, he's going to make it in life, So
That's great. Yeah, and seeing that in junior developers too, right? Like, for every time that they fail, there's sometimes where they succeed, and there are a million ways to solve a computer programming problem, and some of them are more outstanding than the ones that you were thinking of, and they've shown it to you right in front of you, like, wow, that is amazing. I like that. And that's the fun part about being on a team.
One thing that came to mind was the importance of expectations and kind of easing people into things. There's a lot of overhead up front. There's a lot of priming the pump with a new project, a new team, a new campaign, where you have to allow time and space for people to gel and figure things out. And I think that kind of can happen in the planning phase, which is another reason that planning is important. But not expecting everybody to come out of the gate at full speed, not dumping a lot in terms of sprints and all the other kind of stuff. It's like, okay, we're not gonna accomplish as much per week starting out, so we're not gonna expect as much, but we are gonna be adding this team building, getting started component. So it's not like you're doing nothing, but I think it's important, and then easing a new member in to a group. Like, you're up and running, you've gelled as a team, but then someone else comes in and it's like, okay, we might have to slow down a little bit so they can catch up, and then we can accelerate from here. How do you onboard new people into a game, like in an existing campaign?
I haven't had to do it for a while, but I know a couple of years ago when I did that, I would run an initial session for that person and maybe one other person, just to get them so they understood the mechanics, the feel of the game. And then once they understood that, then I would introduce that person into the larger group, where they kind of had a feel for things ahead of time and didn't we did paired programming initially, then brought them in and gave them a task.
There you go. Beautiful.
wow.
So on that same note, Steve, does your long-running campaign finish projects and go on to the next one, or is it just a forever project for them?
So the one campaign that I ran, it probably went for about 2 years, and it was 40 some adventures that were roughly 5 hours each.
Wow.
Zoinks.
And No characters died in that one.
Good.
Which was good. And then I ended it. It was okay. I'll get a little nerdly here for you. It was loosely based on Napoleon placing his brother in charge of Italy during the time when the United States was first drafting their constitution and becoming like a country. And there were threats around Europe of other places wanting constitutions like Italy, and all the neighboring monarchies being like, no, don't do that. So that was the backdrop for this whole campaign, was this region that wanted to become like a republic and draft a constitution, and all the monarchies were against them. And so there was all this political intrigue going on as the backdrop.
Interesting.
Okay.
That sounds fun.
Eventually, the war that was coming was the final conclusion, with one slight little aftermath, with a tip of the cap to Lord of the Rings, when they went back to the Shire and Saruman was there, and they had to clean up one last little issue, and then that was the end of the campaign. Those characters are still alive. We might even at some point like bring them back and go, hey, here's a new campaign for them to start right where they are now and move on. But we just sort of ended it there, and I said I'm kind of burned out for a while, and somebody else took the mantle of the D&D enthusiast, and now I'm a player in
Nice.
that group.
So do you have a happy hour at the end of those kinds of things too then, like in work life?
Well, in the work ones we have not, though that would be a good thing to do. I'm totally a fan of that. During my online game, of course, I have a couple of beers during the game, but not until a certain point of the night. 9 p.m. is where I first indulge myself in a beer. Otherwise, it can really detract from the game.
You've had experience that it changes your decision making.
It does. Yes, I have been. I wouldn't characterize myself as being a mess, but I was not thinking critically.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
So we're kind of rolling up on our time. I have one question, and then we can maybe get into our parting thoughts. If you're running a campaign and somebody's character dies within like the first hour, do you make them leave?
No way. No. In fact, if somebody's character dies, there's usually like some nearby temple that can either resurrect them, and then say, all right, we're going to do this for you, but then now we've just pushed the plot, because now the temple is going to say, and we have a quest for you to do next time. Okay, which is great.
Nice.
The other option is, which has happened in some of my parties, the current game that I'm in, that person's rolling up a new character on the spot. And once they've got the character rolled up, we somehow insert them into the adventure. Maybe they have to wait a little bit where they're being held captive in some room or something, and the party finds them.
You bump into the stranger walking along the road, and
Yes.
he asks if he can join, right?
Yep. No,
Perfect.
nobody gets sent home.
Awesome. I like it.
Kyle wants
That's what I
cutthroat
worry
D&D.
about. Like, how hardcore are these people? Like, am I gonna just get kicked out of the room?
No.
Awesome. Well, my parting thought is that I'm gonna play D&D. I think I'm gonna join your next session on a
Sweet.
Saturday, and Bennett's gonna come with.
Al's gonna pick me up. He volunteered.
I don't speak for Bennett, so. Peter, any parting thoughts?
I am, when we started this, I was a little bit skeptical of the parallelism, but as we've talked through, there's so many good things can come from both, and having that experience and gaming will help you in real life, no matter what they say.
Awesome. Bennett, are you going to play?
I think I might try it. And I also need to get another session spun up of the other game that I'm playing. Talking about this has made me want to play again, so I might have to get a session of that spun up as well.
Steve, I think you've helped inspire all of us to play.
Good. I think one of the interesting things about the game, just in role playing in general, but also being part of a group, is you start learning to have a little bit more empathy than you typically would. And I think a little more empathy in this world can go a long way right now.
Yeah. Awesome. And I think with that, we should call it. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Peace out.
Bye, everybody.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.